There's only one person alive that has the answers to so many people's questions about me.
For nearly 15 years, Charlie Sheen was the highest paid man on American television. A salary of $1,800,000 per episode, $1 million per season. The most recognizable face on CBS Monday nights. And during that exact same period, he was hiding at least 3 secrets that, had they surfaced, would have ended everything. In September 2025, at 60 years old, Sheen published his memoir and appeared in a 2-part Netflix documentary. For the first time, in his own voice, the full story.
Somewhat entertaining. Were you entertained when you read it?
Absolutely.
Right, good. Okay, check that box.
Filtered through tabloids. Not mediated by publicists. Agreements. What he revealed was not just different from what Hollywood knew. Opposite. The name on the birth certificate was Carlos Irwin Estevez, 3rd, 1965. Sheen and Janet Templeton, a former art student who had moved to Manhattan. Shortly before, his father had adopted the stage surname Sheen in honor of Archbishop Fulton J.S. Sheen, a figure Martin deeply admired.
And then I did something I wanted to do for a long time, and I went to a nice hotel that has a lovely spa by myself.
The industry, he did the same. He took the English version of his Spanish name, took his father's stage surname, and Carlos Estevez disappeared into the light. There was something strategic in that decision, and something painful. His own last name to be accepted by an industry that, decades later, Martin Sheen himself would call one of his greatest regrets. Malibu. The choice felt obvious. The family had moved from New York to California after Martin began working in Hollywood, and producers. Same path. It was the environment. It was the air. His high school classmates included Robert Downey Jr., Sean Penn, and Chris Penn. Make home movies in the backyard turned out to be the rehearsal for one of Hollywood's most explosive careers. A few weeks before graduation, Charlie was expelled. Too many absences. Below the minimum. Roles. He was 17 when he landed his first role with any real weight. When he starred in Platoon. Platoon arrived in theaters in 1986. Oliver Stone directed. The Academy Award for Best Picture. Standing at the center of one of the most acclaimed war dramas in American history. The reviews were unanimous. Crafted. He was the son of Martin Sheen, who had made Apocalypse Now. Was not standing in his father's shadow. He was building his own identity. The following year, Oliver Stone called him back. This time for Wall Street. Time, alongside Martin Sheen himself. Father and son. The same stage name. Same screen. Charlie's character, Bud Fox. The ambitious young broker willing to cross any ethical line for money was, with the benefit of time, more autobiographical than anyone imagined. The following years brought Young Guns, Major League, Hot Shots. 94. The name Charlie Sheen was cemented into the Hollywood Walk of Fame. In 2000, he replaced Michael J. Best Actor in a Comedy, and CBS came knocking. 2 years later, 2.5 Men premiered. 2.5 Men premiered in September 2003 on CBS and rapidly became the most watched comedy on American television. Million viewers per episode. Nominated for 46 Emmy Awards, Globe nominations. And, at the center of it all, Charlie Harper, a jingle composer who lived on the beach, drank whiskey before lunch, and never seemed to face real consequences for any of his choices. It was fiction, but for anyone who knew Charlie Sheen's life, it was almost a mirror. Sheen's salary grew every season, $1,800,000 per episode, the highest salary ever paid to an actor in a television series at that time. $1 million. His scene partner John Cryer earned 1/3 of that. 2025. Cryer described the situation with a comparison that became widely quoted. The dictator of North Korea behaved erratically all the time and, because of that, received enormous amounts of aid from countries so afraid of him that they would shovel money in his direction. That is what happened here. The producers needed Charlie Sheen. The show needed Charlie Sheen. Sheen knew it. What nobody knew, not the producers, not John Cryer, not the 14 million viewers, was what was happening off camera. At some point in 2011, Charlie Sheen began experiencing severe headaches, night sweats, unexplained fever. He believed it was a brain tumor. He believed it was the end. After a battery of tests, including a spinal tap he described as hideous, the diagnosis arrived. It was not a tumor. It was HIV. He was 45 years old. He was at the peak of his career. Received the diagnosis that, at that moment, he was convinced would destroy Can. The immediate reaction was not to seek support. It was to build a wall. People who stayed at his home began photographing the antiretroviral medications left in his bathroom. Then came the messages. They wanted money to stay silent. And Sheen paid. He confirmed that he paid more than $10 million over the years to keep the diagnosis out of the tabloids. To one person. And while all of that was happening, 2.5 Men kept airing. What came next? The public collapse of 2011. The incoherent interviews, the tiger blood, the winning, was interpreted by the world as the moment. Charlie Sheen lost his mind. Time. The HIV diagnosis had come before the collapse, not after. Sheen confirmed this in 2011 Meltdown. The 2011 Meltdown was not a response to the diagnosis. The sequence was reversed. HIV positive, collapsed emotionally, and the cameras were rolling through all of it. He was, in his own words, trapped inside an alternate reality, or inside a nightmare. And the only way out he could find was to keep paying. In January 2011, filming of 2.5 Men's 8th season was suspended after Sheen entered rehabilitation. CBS and Warner Bros. Waited. Show was too valuable to cancel over a single actor. But Sheen did not stay quiet. That appeared. He called Chuck Lorre, the show's creator, his direct boss, a contaminated little maggot, a clown, a charlatan with an unevolved mind. Warner Bros. Banned Sheen from entering the studio lot, demand a 50% raise, claiming that compared to what the series was generating, he was underpaid. In March 2011, CBS and Warner Bros. Terminated his contract. Charlie Sheen was fired. Sheen sued Laura and Warner Brothers for $100 million, settled for an estimated $25 million paid to Sheen by the studio, covering episodes he had already filmed before being let go. Outside the studio, Sheen was giving interviews claiming he had tiger blood and Adonis DNA, that he was winning. He was special. None of that was the actual language of what was happening, was fear, and $10 million in silence payments. In 1995, Charlie Sheen testified at the trial of Heidi Fleiss, the woman, known as the Hollywood Madam.
There's like an air of denial in my family. No, it's just about...
Charged with running a high-end prostitution ring, frequented by some of the most powerful names in the entertainment industry. Sheen admitted in court to having been a client, $50,000 on services. Instead of using cash, he had used traveler's checks. And checks leave a trail. Fleiss, 30 years later, had not forgiven him. She stated that she had never revealed the name of any client, have revealed Sheen's name, marijuana possession, had refused to name his dealer, the same. Sheen explained his position. The prosecutor had threatened to charge him with pandering, which could have meant 3 to 5 years in prison. Was no other way out. The episode received relatively little attention at the time, overshadowed by the more immediate scandal of the Fleiss trial itself. Charlie Sheen operated inside the industry, always negotiating survival. Always. Weighing the cost of revealing against the cost of concealing. The choice to stay silent, in that case, cost Heidi Fleiss her freedom. Established a pattern that Sheen would repeat with other secrets for decades. In September 2025, during an interview on Good Morning America to promote his book, Charlie Sheen made a revelation that no publicist had approved, and that no Hollywood screenwriter would have dared to write. For the first time in 60 years of life, he spoke publicly about having had sexual encounters with men. He used a metaphor in the Netflix documentary. Long enough, at some point you turn the menu over and see what is on the other side. And that is what happened. On Good Morning America, he explained why he had kept it secret. Blackmail involved. To make the material public, he paid. He stayed silent, and the threat came back. He described the feeling of having lived decades trapped in that cycle as being held hostage was the only way to become unextortable. The word he used to describe the moment he told the truth was liberating. There was nothing left that anyone could use against him. Over. The secret had lost its power. On November 17, 2015, Charlie Sheen sat beside Matt Lauer on The Today Show and said 3 words that stopped the news cycle that morning. I am HIV positive. He had been diagnosed 4 years earlier. To keep the secret. Regardless, the decision to disclose was, at least in part, strategic. Real. He described the moment of diagnosis as receiving a mule kick to the soul. Had been convinced he had a brain tumor, and that when he learned the truth, he went through a strange process of relief before processing what it actually meant. The world's reaction was not what he had expected. In the 3 weeks following the announcement, the United States recorded approximately 2,750,000 more searches than expected. For the term HIV, 1,250,000 of those searches were directly relevant to public health. People looking for information on condoms, HIV symptoms, and where to get tested. Researchers named the phenomenon the Charlie Sheen effect. Circulated observations at the time noted that Charlie Sheen had done more for HIV education than most United Nations events. An actor who had spent years paying to hide a diagnosis had, by revealing it, triggered one of the largest HIV awareness movements in the United States in 2 decades. Charlie Sheen's net worth at its peak was difficult to calculate precisely. Verified numbers are enough to understand the scale. $1,800,000 per episode at the end of 2.5 men. $40 million per season. 2012, he earned $2 million per episode. Street and Young Guns, he had built one of the most lucrative careers in American cinema of the 1980s and 90s. In 2025, estimates placed his net worth at $3 million. $10 million in blackmail payments, lawsuits, dollars per month to each of his 2 ex-wives, Denise Richards and Brooke Mueller. 5 children. The money was gone, but there was something harder to quantify than money. A false version of yourself, paying to keep the real version hidden. Charlie Harper, a man who never faced real consequences for any choice, while, off camera, the consequences arrived in million-dollar installments. John Cryer, who worked alongside Sheen for 8 years, said in the documentary, "When I started, I had hair. It was not a joke about aging, was disintegrating in slow motion, and whom no one around him could stop." There is a detail in the 2025 documentary that received less attention than it deserved. A man named Marco, identified in the film as a longtime friend and former drug supplier of Sheen, revealed that he had been approached by one of Sheen's rehabilitation counselors with an unusual request. The counselor wanted Marco to gradually reduce the potency of the crack he was supplying, without Sheen knowing. Marco said he agreed. Reduce the amount of cocaine in the crack he delivered week by week in a calculated clandestine detoxification. Sheen did not know. He had not consented. The reaction was mixed. There was something simultaneously moving and unsettling about the image of a drug dealer being the instrument of sobriety for a man Hollywood had given up on. But that was the reality. Not a luxury rehabilitation center. Recovery. Client would survive. In 2011, Charlie Sheen called Chuck Lorre a contaminated little maggot in an open letter published on the internet. He said he violently hated him. $100 million. In 2023, the two of them embraced at the first table read for Bookie, a new comedy on Max. Chuck Lorre told Variety, "I was nervous. Remembered that we were once friends. Again, I do not want to be sentimental about it, but it was healing." Sheen described the process differently, apologizing that he wanted to put everything behind him, but do it properly. Honesty. With nobility. With completeness. The reunion with Lorre was part of that choice. It was not just making peace with a former boss. Acknowledging that the 2011 collapse had been, in Sheen's own words, desperately juvenile situation, and he had chosen number 56. The series finale of 2.5 Men in 2015 had included a scene where Sheen's character, Charlie Harper, returned home only to be crushed by a falling piano. That was the farewell Chuck Lorre wrote for the man he had fired. In 2023, the two were sitting at the same table. Lorre said, "It was closure. It was healing. Art." In 2025, Charlie Sheen had been sober for nearly 8 years. The Book of Sheen debuted on the New York Times bestseller list. Documentary generated some of the largest press coverage the actor had received in a decade, with something other than collapse. It was associated with truth. A strange truth, imperfect, built across decades of strategic lies and blackmail, payments and purchased silences. But truth. What remains of the Charlie Sheen case is not a clean redemption story. Neat arc. What he had done, and who, when he stopped lying, discovered that the world did not fall apart. HIV searches exploded across the United States when he revealed the diagnosis. Academic study named the phenomenon. 750,000 additional searches occurred in the 3 weeks that followed. Health information. A man who spent $10 million to hide 3 letters ended up by revealing them, triggering one of the largest HIV awareness movements in the United States in 20 years. That is the kind of irony Hollywood cannot write. The nerve to make it believable. Carlos Irwin Estevez became Charlie Sheen to enter an industry that did not want Carlos Estevez. Inside that same industry, what the 2025 documentary and the memoir revealed was not simply scandal. What an industry allows them to be. On Good Morning America, in September 2025, Sheen said, "I had just been writing a story for all these years about how, if I ever revealed that, this is how I would be treated, this is how they would feel about me. And then, I revealed it. Train did not come through the side of the restaurant. A piano did not fall from the sky. Nobody ran into the room and shot him. The secret had lost its power. Not because the world had changed, had stopped feeding the fear. That is what remains. Salary. Not 40 years in Hollywood. Not the 10 million paid in silence. What remains is a man at 60 years old saying, finally, that he is no longer running from anything.